Hello everyone, this is Shadow. Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I can't publish many of the audiobooks you love. That's why I've created a special paid service where you can enjoy over 300 high-quality audiobooks from platforms like Webnovel, Pocket FM, Audible, Wuxia, and more. Each novel comes as a one-time purchase, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. After payment, you'll receive full access via Telegram, along with all future updates for that novel. You'll find a wide selection of your favorite genres and titles, always in premium audio quality. Check the full list of available novels in the description. DM me now to get your favorite stories in audiobook form and start listening today. Chapter 955 Dwarven Sensibilities. As soon as the governor was gone, the locals flooded in to see what Carl and his group had for sale. Most of them hadn't been interested in buying magical accessories today, but once the adventurers left, they would still be living in a desert and water was a precious commodity. The cistern below the city might be full, but it also contained the runoff of the city streets. It was good enough for washing or feeding animals, but only the most desperate would drink it themselves even after boiling it. There were purification spells widely available, but those who would drink cistern water or puddle water were unlikely to be able to afford one. But now that the cistern was actually full and not just an emergency backup, perhaps the dwarven clerics would purify the whole thing and make it safe enough for general use. The stall was quickly crowded with shoppers even after they had realized that the runic magical items were prohibitively expensive. They already had arrangements with the trollish shamans to come around and fill their water barrels or household cisterns, so it wasn't like they would die without spending a month's salary or more on a magical ring. But for the shopkeepers, especially the restaurants, this was a golden opportunity. Purifying water for many trades like pottery and papermaking was a long and painful process. But the rings made pure water. The restaurants simply saw an opportunity to get ahead of their competition. How luxurious would it be to be able to offer free water at the table in the desert? Normally, it was a limited item that they charged for. They could steal customers every day with service like that. Then someone realized that they had forgotten one minor detail during the massive rainstorm. The effect that Carl and Remy had caused was roughly 100 kilometers in radius. But the next two cities, Banar to their west and Shathlil to the south, were roughly 120 kilometers away. How mad were they going to be that a massive storm had washed away the drought right up to the farms closest to their city? Wouldn't that feel like a direct slight to them? Also, were they all cursed? Shathlil wasn't in the desert and it got regular coastal storms, so it was likely fine. But Banar was definitely in the desert and built along one of the few rivers that carried runoff from the mountains in Nulmulgat through Gabble. It might still be suffering from the curse and the storm didn't make it to their city walls. Mr. Carl, will you be stopping at Banar? They're in a similar situation to us and outside the storm area. I bet that they would thank you for breaking the curse on them as well. One of the beastkin men asked as he examined the details of a ring of tidiness. Carl frowned. I hadn't intended to, but if they might also be cursed, perhaps it would be best if we did. Their curse might have broken due to the storm even if it didn't make it to them. There is so much water here that it would have caused their curse to activate once the storm got close enough. That should have alerted the shamans to the issue. Lotus poked Carl in the side and he sighed. All right, we will stop in and see how things went there. If they need help, we can try to break whatever curse is going on there as well. He amended. Ray giggled in Carl's mind. Good call. There might be more Bombkin spies there as well. They're kind of dumb, but they're fun to hunt. Carl smiled at Lotus, who had no idea that the conversation had taken a very dark turn after her well-intentioned suggestion. Instead, Lotus simply thought that she had managed to win a victory for the balance of nature. Technically, she wasn't wrong. It would be a victory for the balance of nature. But it would also be a stealth hunting trip for Ray, who had already cleared all the spies that she could find from Baruch. This ring, will it clean my entire hotel? A large Werebear man asked. It should. Most would do it a room at a time, so they know that it's doing it properly and not tossing a guest's belongings around. But if you put effort into it, cleaning the whole hotel shouldn't be too big of an issue. Carl agreed. Lotus nodded in agreement. If you do it right, it will clean your laundry as well. Takes the mess right out. She had 100% used one of those items to clean up spilled snacks before. Carl was certain of it. Bonded clothing could just be returned to your space and come back clean. But the furniture could not. One after another, the items in the case were snapped up by the locals until finally what was left were craftsmen who didn't need the original items in the case. The cleaning rings were useful but not enough that many of the dwarves who had apprentices would pay the fee. They already paid an apprentice who was fully capable of cleaning. So, Carl brought out a few more options. These are commander rank, not exactly the peak of the art, but I thought you might like them. I have rings with an increased chance of a higher grade outcome while crafting. We also have ones with increased focus, which is good for preventing spelling errors and random mistakes. Then I have a single overlord ranked bracer that increases both the chance of increased item grade and the chance of success when crafting a new type of item. Carl announced. The dwarves began to take their shirts off and Lotus gave Carl a strange look. What are they up to? She whispered. I believe that they're predicting a fight over who gets the overlord ranked item and they don't want their favorite shirts torn. Chapter 956 Dwarven Negotiations. Lotus rolled her eyes, but the argument started within seconds. Now, I'm standing closest, so I'm next in line. Just accept defeat and walk away, an overlord-ranked dwarf who had the Master Blacksmith tag under his name announced. Your brain's as janky as your work if you think that you're walking away with that bracer. One of the other smiths declared. Thwack. The sound of fist hitting face made it clear how the dwarf felt about having the quality of his work questioned. But another smith immediately stepped up to the counter. As they're busy, I'll take the bracer off your hands. I've got materials to trade. Totem ranked. He offered. You greasy son of a gnome, don't you go sweet-talking the demon while we're still settling an insult. The first dwarf insisted. Your mother's a gnome, now beat it. I'm shopping. The situation in front of the shop turned to an all-out brawl, so Carl settled into one of the swinging chairs and pulled Dana into his lap while they waited. From the corner of the booth, a smiling young beastkin knocked on the wooden counter. I'll take one of the cleaning rings if there are any left. It took me a bit to get my boss to agree to spend the money. She requested. Lotus took the gold and handed over the ring, then patted the girl's ears. The cat girl just shook her head and smiled. I swear it's physically painful for a green dragon cleric not to touch the fluffy things. Lotus nodded. Did you know that the green dragon god's largest temple in the world is in a nation populated almost entirely by beastkin? The girl laughed. Oh, I don't doubt it. It's either among the beastkin or lost in a forest. Somewhere. Carl turned his attention to the brawl and noticed something odd. Though the dwarves would grab and flip each other, even go for choke holds and give a noogie, not one time did he see one grab another's beard. They would punch the chest behind it but never grab the beard. The unstated rules of the dwarven brawls were strong. Eventually, the city guard came to break it up, and the third dwarf, the one who had offered the totem-ranked materials, stood victorious over the scrum. Well then. Good effort, gentlemen. But today's victory is mine. He declared, then placed a large bag on the counter which creaked under the weight. Carl looked in the bag and nodded, then handed over the bracer. There were a half-dozen totem-ranked elemental stones and a bunch of metal alloys in the bag. So, it was certainly worth as much as the bracer, and Ashbringer would be happy to see the new materials for his forge. With the fighting over, the market began to calm down, and the last few shoppers who were hoping to get something from Carl's stand were quickly handled. Mostly by Ophelia, because the beastkin had quickly realized that Lotus could be bribed into giving heavy discounts to those with fluffy ears. But they did eventually sell all that they had intended to sell, and the town was now well stocked with water creation items, so hopefully they would not suffer if there was some lingering curse effects once the ground began to dry. If nothing else, at least they now had the tools to keep the crops and the city watered. Well ladies, should we head off to Banar and see how they are doing? We can spend the night there and see if there is any talk of the curse fires to go with the rain. That should tell us enough about whether the curse has broken. Carl suggested. Lotus nodded. Does that mean I get to fly on Naksha? The black dragon raised an eyebrow at her. Who says I'm flying there and not taking a nice nap in the tiny world? One of the dwarves who was at the counter buying the last remaining cleaning ring smiled at the pair. It must be quite the luxury for a group to have multiple flying mounts. It certainly beats 3 days with the farmer's cart to get to Banar. Remy smiled back at him. Flying is a great skill. I can fly in spirit snake form, but I'm still too slow for travel. The dwarf chuckled. A flying snake fast enough to challenge a dragon's travel time would be quite something. I wouldn't feel bad about not being able to keep up with her. Remy laughed. I can't even keep up with Carl's flying speed. He just runs through the air, but his legs are so much stronger that his sprinting is faster than my flying. The dwarf nodded. Cat demons are tricky like that. You never know what sort of hidden, sneaky spells they have in reserve. Remy nodded in agreement. Carl had more hidden skills than most. Carl shrugged and then motioned for Ray to take down the stall. Let's get packed up and then we can free the booth for anyone else who wants it. Many of the vendors switched out partway through the day when they ran out of goods. They didn't hang around to sell the last few items, they would just pack them back up for next week or sell the perishables to another booth at a discount and call it a day. Then someone else would set up at the booth or their neighbors would spread out if nobody came forward to claim the open spot. Here in the core of the market, the stalls were in high demand later in the day. Unlike the stalls like the part-time bakeries and vegetable dealers, their goods wouldn't lose any quality being out in the sun all afternoon. It didn't take Ray long to take down their stall and get everyone ready to move. Everyone, say goodbye and we can go, Carl announced. That confused the group, but Hawk was up in the sky, hunting for mice who had survived the storm, and he was within clear view of the city they wanted to visit. There were many signs of chaos outside the city walls, but most of them were farmers opening the irrigation canals so the flooding from the storm would spread west to the regions that hadn't been reached. Carl opened the entrance to the tiny world to let everyone in, then opened a portal to Hawk and stepped through himself. The feeling of weightlessness overtook him as he watched the ground rush up at him from 1,000 meters in the air. He let himself free fall for a few moments, then activated swims through air to stop his descent. You're close enough. I'm going to keep hunting, Hawk decided. I will call for you when I reach the city so they don't mistake you for a threat to more than their rodent population. Carl realized that they had just ditched the city governor of Baruch, who would have wanted to socialize all night in return for the favor of having broken the curse on his city, but they had enough things to do without starting tomorrow morning with everyone nursing a hangover. Chapter 957 Banner Farms. Carl changed into his best black suit and opened a portal and stepped through to appear beside a group of trollish farmers. The trolls stopped what they were doing when the black-striped cat demon in a suit appeared beside their effort to open the canals, which had been unused for most of a year and had filled with blown sand in a number of spots. Good evening. Would you mind answering a few questions for me? I will trade you a boon for answers. Carl offered. The trolls smiled, well aware of the tricks of the cat demons. We will answer what we want. Ask your questions. The oldest of them asked. When the storm was raging, were there patches of green fire? Carl began. Curse fire? Yes, all along the edge of the storm, like a wall. It raged for half an hour, then faded. The troll elder agreed. Were there any patches outside the storm? The troll nodded. The fire ran up the canals when they began to flood. Even the city moat filled with fire, but our shamans broke the curse. He was obviously proud of the accomplishment, and for good reason. The curse had gone unnoticed for years, and only the massive storm had revealed it. So, the fact that they had managed to break it so quickly after it was revealed was a huge thing. The shamans in Baruch had waited until the curse fires were nearly out to even start trying to break it. But they were also getting drenched the second that they stepped outside, so the reluctance was understandable. Excellent. If the drought curse was broken, half the work is already done. Ray, you can go hunt spies now if you think you'll find them. Ray laughed and activated Night Haunter, then raced off to the city where Carl saw her easily vault the city walls with the guards oblivious to her presence. Those are all my questions. Now, I offer you a choice of boons. Do you want me to flood the canals you have recently cleared? Or do you want a trinket to fill your drinking water barrels at home? Carl offered. The old troll smiled and a steady stream of water poured from his hand. This old shaman can still make enough water for drinking. Please flood the canals that we have opened starting from that point. The troll pointed to a spot 100 meters away, so Carl jogged over, fast enough that the trolls hardly saw him move. A controlled casting of thousand-year flood pointed from the closed gate where he had been directed to start, then toward the city, caused a raging torrent of water to enter the canals. Canals that Carl quickly realized were actually lined with stone and exquisitely fitted by generations of dwarves. That interlocking stone couldn't be anyone else's handiwork. The raging flood pushed a wall of dirt and debris before it as it spread through the canals, and Carl smiled as he realized that the spot was open to most of the east side of the city. It would take some time to flood the entire canal system without flooding the entire region. While he channeled and the trolls celebrated, Remy was studying the spell. I have it. I understand how the thousand-year flood works. The caster is the river, the Naga announced. Oh, how is that? The larger the river, the greater the thousand-year flood. If I do it at monarch rank, it is only a few thousand liters over a minute, like a stream flooding once in 1,000 years. But if we increase it again, it will increase 1,000-fold. Once more. So, a totem-ranked 1,000-year flood will be 1 billion liters a minute for every user rank, and a mythic-ranked casting will be 1,000 billion liters per user rank. She explained, unsure if there was a specific world for such a large amount. Maybe you were meant to change measurement units? Cubic meters instead of liters? That was 1,000 to 1 reduction. Perfect for measuring this increase. What sort of insane scaling was that? 1 billion liters a minute would truly live up to the legendary grade status of the spell. But the spell couldn't even be used below monarch rank. That might be why they hadn't encountered such high-grade spells and items before. They simply weren't usable by someone of his level. But didn't that mean that someone like Supreme Lady Matilda could cause a small sea to flood with the spell? Or was there perhaps a limit? Either way, he wasn't going to ask her to try. She would probably think it was funny to flood a random country. Kara certainly would, and the two seemed to have a lot in common. While Carl finished flooding the cleared canals and tried not to laugh at all the drenched farmers downstream who hadn't known that there was a flood coming until the wall of debris arrived, Remy pondered the potential of legendary skills. Couldn't you create your own country reshaped to look just like you wanted it to if you were a mythic creature with a legendary earth element or large area? Skill? If her Naga swamp was legendary and not just epic, wouldn't it create a swamp many times larger than the 10 meters per rank? With that and the 1,000-year flood, she could create a whole Naga nation, flooded swamps as far as the eye could see. She needed to upgrade her skills. Upgrading Overlord ranked skills to Totem ranked wasn't going as smoothly as the Skill Master advancements had at lower ranks. By now, they should certainly have had at least one more skill at the Totem rank. So, she focused on stretching her abilities within the tiny world. Not damaging the world, but pushing the limits of her skill power, trying for an upgrade to her comprehension that would let her activate Skill Master. She was the first one to advance, so logically she should be the first one to get a reward. If Kara managed to get both Void Blast and Nullify to Totem ranked before anyone else had a Totem ranked skill, they would never live it down. The smugness would be overwhelming. Chapter 958 Banner City. Carl smiled as the canals began to level out near the upper safe usage line. The trolls were staring in awe at the massive amount of water that Carl had generated, unaware of the chaos that it had caused further downstream. They suspected, but without the advantage of hawk watching from overhead, they couldn't be certain. Fortunately, it was all adults working on the canals, so there were no major injuries and no weaker people washed downstream when the water arrived. There you go, boon granted. Thank you for your answers. Carl informed the old troll. Does this mean that we will start getting normal rainfall again? The aging shaman asked. As long as someone finds and eliminates all the spies from Bomgan who cursed your region in the first place. Carl agreed. The troll made an annoyed growling noise. I should have known that it was them. It's always them. Carl nodded. They have been spreading all over the coastal areas from what I hear. I don't have all the details, but I'm also not from here. I am just visiting to hunt for monster spawns. The abundance of insane creatures has upset the dragon gods and the balance of nature. The troll gave Carl a strange look. You are worried what the dragon gods think? There are multiple dragon clerics in my traveling group, including a black dragon. Once the imbalance got large enough that even the black dragon clerics got annoyed, it was certainly time that someone went to deal with it. The farmers all nodded proudly at Carl's determination. Trolls always did what they set their minds to. But thinking that he could make a difference with one single group and a whole country full of troubles bordered on Orcish levels of delusions of grandeur. Even the demons didn't usually aim that high with their mission goals. Are you going to the city? The shaman asked instead of commenting on Carl's mission. Yeah, I thought we might spend the night inside the city to see if there are lingering signs of the curse. If it's broken, we can just move along and go hunt the interior. If not, we can make it rain again and try to shatter the remaining curse here so the edge of the desert doesn't spread any further. The troll nodded. I think that you should keep it quiet that there are known spies in the city. If they start hiding, we might never find out who they are. Carl patted the old man on the shoulder. My spy hunter should have found the first of them by now. When things go wrong, spies always go hide in an abandoned building and gather to discuss their plans. The troll laughed. What else would they do? Carl shrugged. If they were smart, they would shut their mouth and pretend that their cause never existed. In Carl's mind, Ray laughed. She had just found a group of 30 spies. In an abandoned warehouse? But there was a local city spy in the rafters beside her, listening to their plans as well. Now she had a dilemma. Did she wait for them to finish so the local city spy got all his information? Or did she traumatize him for fun? Oh, who was she kidding? They were at the point of making new plans now. Those didn't matter if nobody left the room alive. Oh, this time the undead spell made nights. Ray informed Carl. Carl could only wonder how the city was going to take that bit of knowledge. Ray was supposed to be eliminating Bomgan's spies, but it was going to look like she was actually a Bomgan agent punishing them for their failure. Just don't let anyone see you while you're using the undead in the city. Carl reminded her, just to be safe. Got it, boss? Stealth mode. As Carl had expected, the local spy had freaked out the moment that the knights had attacked the hapless agents of the Bomgan army. There were overlords among them, but the undead simply shrugged off their attacks with their innate damage reduction and void body active from Carl's epic guard. That was an impressive range for the skill link, Ray decided. It would greatly expand the range of her extracurricular activities if the skill was always active from dozens of kilometers away. Fuck, who called those Spectre Knights? The Banner agent whispered to himself as the undead tore through the Bomgan agents with brutal efficiency, silent except for the sound of blades colliding when the necromancers and their acolytes managed to defend themselves. Right? Very scary. Ray whispered back, then laughed as the spy promptly ran out of the warehouse, no longer concerned about who might see him. The screams would bring the city guard in a few more seconds, so Ray hopped down to join the battle, still invisible. Judicious application of vibrating blade and entangling vines with lacerate for both her own attacks and her summoned undead made a suitably gory scene for a few seconds before she used essence transfer to clean up the blood. The spell seemed to supercharge her, giving her life force beyond her base for a moment before it was absorbed. But the guards were coming, so she reluctantly memorized the spectral knight form and dismissed her army of the dead. Then she returned to the rafters to watch the show as the guards carefully approached the emaciated corpses of the spies. Fuck. What happened to them? 30 dead in under 5 minutes, and I see the corpses of over a dozen overlord-ranked mages. What could have killed them all without any sign of collateral damage? The walls of the warehouse aren't even scratched, not a single missed attack. Could it have been an ambush? And why? The team leader muttered to himself as he examined the area. One of his team members, a fox-eared beastkin, looked around the room cautiously. Whatever did it isn't gone. I can sense the danger in the room, but I can't see or smell anything. It might be an observation spell, he whispered. The guards drew their weapons and Ray resisted the urge to bring out the popcorn while they tried to understand what happened. Then the city spy slid back into the room and closed the front door behind himself. It was a dozen spectral knights. All overlord ranked, and they tore through the group like nothing. These mages were Bomgan spies. I recorded their conversation about how they would rebuild the curse we broke during the rain. The spy whispered. Whatever killed them is still here. The fox man whispered back. The spy began to tremble in fear. Then we need to not be here. It snuck up on me and whispered in my ear. Literally right in my ear, I could feel its breath. But there was nothing there. Ray lost interest in their fear and used Shadow Step to move a few buildings over, searching the shadowed areas of the cities for more spies that might still be meeting. One group was good, two would be better. But even if she didn't find more spies, there was so much tea spilling and debauchery going on in the shadows that she couldn't resist a few detours. Who knew that there could be so many hidden romances and intrigues in one city? And the city lord's heir wasn't actually who everyone thought it was? That was unexpected. Also, definitely popcorn-worthy, Ray decided as she watched the dwarf whisper empty promises in the ear of his mistress while their son showed off his school reports. Sister Butterfly would love this show. The Carl needed to teach Night Haunter to everyone. Chapter 959 Ray Loves Tea. While Ray spied on the intimate lives of the city lord and his mistress, Carl began to jog towards the city walls. The farmers were all busy setting up their irrigation equipment so that they could make the most of the influx of water so they wouldn't have time to stand around and chat even if Carl had more questions. On the other hand, the city guard had many questions for him. Overlord, a moment of your time, please. We have been informed that you have some knowledge of the recent events involving a curse on the region, a massive rainstorm, and then the flooding of the irrigation canals. The gate guard announced as Carl approached. Of course. Perhaps I should call out the rest of my group for this. It might be easier if you got the story from everyone's perspective. Carl offered. In response, Hawk dove from the sky and shrunk himself to land on the wooden fence rail near the side of the road, which confused the dwarf as the bird would obviously not be answering any questions. But when Carl opened the tiny world and the ladies stepped out along with Thor in his humanoid form plus Kara and Remy, it made much more sense. The bird wasn't there for input, he was just part of the group. Carl cleared his throat and began. The people of Baruch asked us to help them out by making it rain. The curse had prevented any regular rain and greatly limited the amount of water that the locals could create. But the effect wasn't as strong on new arrivals and it didn't stop us from creating the storm, which didn't quite reach you but did drop significant rainfall. That caused the curse to react, which was the green flames you saw, and the shamans nullified the curse after it revealed itself. It is believed that Bomgin was behind the curse. There were some spies captured in Baruch and they admitted that they were working for Bomgin before suffering a tragic accident. The flooding of the irrigation canals was a request by local farmers. I granted them a boon in exchange for information and they wanted water. The dwarf shook his head in dismay, then sighed. Flooding all the irrigation canals might have caused some side effects, but he could completely understand why the farmers would pick that as the boon to be granted them by a cat demon. So, you watched it all happen? The guard asked, directing the question at Remy. Saw it? We did it. All those things, it was us. Well, me and Carl. We're the ones best with water magic. The dwarf made a note on the ledger at the gatehouse and motioned them forward. Thank you for your time. Please enter the city and enjoy your stay in Banar. Carl led the group through the gates and found that the city of Banar made the city of Baruch look positively pristine and modern. The whole city was filthy, stinking, and crumbling. How the dwarves could stand to live with crumbling stone buildings was beyond Carl, but perhaps there was some reason for it. Perhaps we should make it rain here even though the curse has broken. Remy suggested as they walked through the bustling city streets. Carl saw a sign for an inn and considered getting a room and just leaving the bodyguards in it while they went to the tiny world. But when they stepped inside, the smell faded and the interior of the place was clean and well-maintained. Carl wiped his boots clean on the mat and nodded to the waitress who gestured towards the mostly open tables. This whole city is beautiful. Dana noted as they took their seats. Lotus nodded in agreement and Ophelia shrugged. There's something off about it. Tessa disagreed. Carl turned to Naksha, who had a pensive look. There's an illusion over the city. I don't think it actually looks like this. She gestured around the room and Carl shook his head. The interior seems to look like I see it, but the outside is crumbling and filthy. I thought that everyone was just used to it, but if you don't see it, that makes total sense. He explained. Kara came out to explore the City of Illusions, prime territory for a void badger with time to kill. Starting with the inn. Nullify spread over the building's interior and the waitress's dress went from plain to ragged while a young dwarven woman shifted to become a much older goblin woman. But the room was otherwise unchanged. The goblin woman's date screamed in horror at the new appearance of the target of his affections and the waitress paused to stare at her dress in confusion. What the hell? The innkeeper asked as he stomped out to the main room looking around furiously. But Kara was already gone, out into the streets and on a hunt for the source of the illusion or shiny things. Whichever came first. Unable to find the source of the issue, the innkeeper's anger quickly faded and he came over to speak to Carl and the ladies. My apologies, it appears that all of the vegetables suddenly rotted. I suspect that there has been some curse put on the city so it might not be possible for us to provide dinner tonight. Carl shrugged. I can ask the lovely priestess Lotus to help you with your vegetable issues, but I wouldn't suggest using anything from storage today. Even if it appears fine, it might actually be rotten. The dwarf frowned and looked toward the ale kegs with trepidation. I have never heard of ale going bad. Do you know when it was brewed? Carl asked. This is this summer's vintage. Still fairly fresh. The innkeeper went over to pull a drink and Carl stealthily cast Nullify on it. But the ale appeared to be fine and the shopkeeper didn't keel over when he drank it. Can you tell me more about the city? Carl asked once the dwarf was assured that his valuables were fine. Oh, I can tell you a lot about the historic city of Banar. Not long ago, the city looked nothing like it does today. It was a 10,000-year-old desert outpost weathered by time, worn to the nub, and protected by heritage regulations, so everything must be rebuilt back the way that it always was. Only 50 years ago did we finally get approval for the renovation, and the city lord brought through a team of earth mages to redo all the major structures of the city. Every historic building was revamped, refreshed back to as good as the day it was built. I put in nearly 1,000 hours updating the inside of my inn so it would look as good as it does now, but you can see where I left the old stones with their chipped and pitted edges. Carl nodded. Indeed, he could see that. The innkeeper had done a wonderful job on the inside of the building. But he was not going to be happy when the illusions broke and he saw what the outside of all the buildings actually looked like. Chapter 960 Hidden Issues. There was a fuss in the street and the dwarf tossed open the door to yell at the troublemakers only to find that nothing looked the way it should. Kara had been gleefully nullifying parts of the illusion as she went, looking for hidden treasures and the source of the spell. So random buildings all along the street, including the outside of the inn, had returned to their actual appearance. But more notably, so had a large portion of their population, and there were oblivious undead wandering the streets, unaware that anyone saw them as anything other than dwarves. If Ray wasn't laughing so hard at the chaos her sister had caused, she would have likely started a riot already by hunting the undead who the locals believed were beloved friends and neighbors. Going on a murderous rampage right now would probably be a bad idea, Rack realized. So, she stopped watching her live-action drama and transformed into a humanoid to go find her people. On the way, she was flagged down by a decomposing trollish man in a surprisingly fancy suit. "Miss, would you be interested in our clothing? I can see that you are a lady of great taste." The undead asked her. Only it wasn't speaking, the words went straight to her mind. "Interesting. Sure, I do love to experience the fashions of each new city that we encounter." The shop that he led her into was falling apart both outside and inside. But the goods were all brand new and high quality. Ray was learning a lot about how the illusions in the city worked. They made things appear new even though they weren't. But they didn't preserve anything. Clothes that were only a few months old were obviously fine. However, the stand they were on was falling apart. The cobblestone streets were rutted but functional. The vegetables in the inn had all rotted while the ones in the market were mostly fine. It was a brilliant bit of magic, and Butterfly was eagerly drinking in the knowledge that Ray and Kara were recovering for her. Ray examined the outfits and picked 2 dresses in styles that she didn't have, then paid the undead man and went back out to the street. "The undead here are strange. They really think that they are alive," she informed the others. Remy had a realization. "I think that they were. When the spell was cast, they were alive. So, it preserved their appearance but not their actual bodies. They're undead and being kept that way by the illusion that is keeping the city looking like it docks. Go check the first few buildings that Kara examined. If I'm right, they'll be back to normal again." Ray turned in that direction, then frowned. "Wait, how am I supposed to know when I can't see the illusion?" Oh, the people, she realized. They were now wondering why the building had looked ruined for a while and thought that was the illusion. Even the innkeeper was staring at the outside of his building in confusion. He was obviously seeing it as new again but couldn't understand what was happening. It wouldn't be long before a few of the more powerful mages in town put 2 and 2 together, though. "Kara, if you find the core of the spell, you probably shouldn't borrow it or you'll kill a large portion of the city before we find a solution." Kara warned the badger. "They're actually kind of polite for undead and it's creeping me out." Kara replied. Ray nodded along. It was definitely creepy how they didn't know that they were dead. But she wondered if there was a safe way to find out if the undead could be brought into her space to decorate it the way that the dead could. Like an interactive exhibition. There should have been some sort of guidebook with these spaces. Having to find out all the rules as you went was just unnecessary. Look what happened to Hawk. He picked the wrong lunch special and it became his sister. Ray stepped into the inn and nodded politely to the innkeeper before joining the rest of the group. "Where did Lotus go?" she asked. "In the kitchen making new vegetables. Their stock had some issues," Tessa explained. That made sense with what Ray had seen in the city. Lotus came out of the kitchen a few minutes later and a few very stressed-looking guards came in the front. "Hey boss. I don't suppose that you have food that is edible, do you?" one of the guards asked. "Yeah, the Green Dragon Cleric just refreshed our stock. What's going on in the city? Do you have any news?" The guard nodded. "There is an illusion all over the city. Once we had the mages start casting specialized detection spells, they could see through it. I don't have all the details, but everyone is looking for the city lord so he can make a decision. It's not like him to go missing during an emergency." Ray looked their way. "He's with his mistress and son right now. It's the boy's birthday and they're doing dinner." The guard choked on his drink. "How the hell did you know that?" Ray shrugged. "I was exploring the city earlier." That didn't really explain anything, but the guard was eager to change the topic. Before anyone else noticed. "Wait, what is this about a mistress and son?" A totem-ranked dwarf sitting in the corner asked. "Too late." Ray looked at the guard. "Can I tell him, or are you sending guards over to pull him back to work?" The guard captain sighed. "I will ask them to bring him here. He's got some questions to answer. Especially about the city. It was his initiative and his contractor that did the renovations of the city. Now that the whole city knows it's all fake, he's going to need to come up with something before there are riots." Besides, the counselor is likely calling the rest of city council here now. Chapter 961 See the Truth. The new guests arrived all at once, and the city guard barred the door to the tavern, keeping everyone inside and prying eyes outside. Needless to say, Kara was quite annoyed when she got to the door and they shooed her away. She simply stepped into her space and then settled on the back of the booth's bench behind Lotus. But the audacity of those guards telling her where she could and couldn't go. Unacceptable. The city lord, a mythic-ranked dwarven warrior, sat at a large round table in the middle of the room, and the totem-ranked mage from the corner moved to join him and the other totems. "Alright, what is so important that I had to come here on my day off?" the city lord demanded. Other than the fact that the entire city knows that the city was never renovated, it was just put under a cursed illusion that made it look new? Oh, the thousands of undead might be a good place to start as well. The people who have died since the renovation are all still around as undead. I don't know how we missed that in the city census. But with the illusion in place, nobody can see what food has spoiled. And now we have a cause for all the mystery illnesses that have been coming to the clerics. The dwarf who had been in the corner of the room demanded in a dry tone. The city lord looked like a deer in the headlights, unsure how to respond to the accusations. "That's not possible, it has to be a lie," he insisted. Kara snorted in amusement, and Ray smirked. "You know, we can prove it to you. Who here has a totem ranked or higher dispel? Or nullify ability? Even a perception spell to see through illusions should do." Ray insisted. One of the dwarves took out a magical device and activated it. "Everything looks fine to me." "What do you mean, there is an illusion?" Ray gestured to the door. "Look outside. The interior of the building was renovated by the owner. Look at everything that was done during the renovation effort." The mage stepped to the door with his magical device, then gasped as he looked at the market, and slammed the door shut again. "What the hell? Why are there undead selling vegetables in the market?" he demanded. "Because the curse keeps them looking just like new. They don't know that they're dead. If you go talk to them, they'll answer like normal. Until they can see through the curse, they won't realize that anything is wrong. How could we miss something like this?" one of the others demanded. They were totems, they should be able to see through any illusion that the spider did. Ray shrugged. "You're likely cursed as well. Would you like to be nullified? We have a winged void badger, and she can disenchant most curses, at least for a while." The city returned to normal after she inspected it. So the curse has a core somewhere. The city lord went paper white at the mention of a core for the curse. "I think that I know what it is. When I invited the stone lord here, he presented the city with a gift, a puzzle box with a magical item inside. I never opened it. Just put it in the treasury with all the other random gifts the city has gotten," he whispered. "So, we just destroy the core or deactivate it, and the city will return to its real appearance?" one of the other council members asked. The lord shook his head, just now realizing what Kara and Ray had been the first to conclude. "If we do destroy the curse, all of the undead will die. The locals will think we murdered a quarter of the population. And then there's the issue of the other curse that was on the city, stopping it from raining." The council member who had been sitting in the tavern from the start frowned and downed his ale. "Well, we're going to have to do something about both before the end of the day. The curse that was stopping it from raining has been mostly taken care of, so that's just a public announcement. But the state of the city is a whole other matter. Soon, the buildings will start collapsing if they're not properly repaired. That's why we authorized the funding to have it done the first time. And that's another issue. We need to fix everything, and the residents will not be happy if we ask them to pay twice, after letting everyone be deceived the first time." One of the other councilmen laughed. "Well, it's not like we can call the Lord's friend back to come fix things now, can we? As he turned out to be a master illusionist and not an earth mage at all. Or a necromancer. It's a bit hard to tell with what I am hearing from outside," one of the others insisted, then held up a stone tablet that had rows of text scrolling over it. Carl was intrigued by the item. It looked like system messages, but appearing on the tablet. The messages started with the same format for names, so it seemed safe to assume that it was a projection of his interface, and not part of a group of networked items. The city lord was clearly getting annoyed by all the jabs at him, but this debacle appeared to be completely a result of his choices. He had handpicked the contractor to do the renovations, and he had gotten the whole city cursed and scammed. What Carl was most interested in was the method he was going to try to talk himself out of this situation. From the look on everyone else's faces, it was not going to be easy. But so far, none of them had a viable solution either. If they did, they would have put it forward just to make the city lord sweat a bit harder. Chapter 962 And Bring It to Light. While the city council had enough trouble on their plate just trying to sort out the issues with the curse, that was far from the only issue that they were going to face that day. A pounding on the door, along with the sound of someone fighting the guards, turned into an irate dwarven woman storming into the tavern. dragging a younger dwarven woman by the hair while a young boy thumped at her back and shouted to let his mother go. The city lord went pale, and Ray brought out a bag full of the Guild Kitchen's signature caramel popcorn and peanut mix. What the hell is going on now? One of the councilmen asked. Carl grabbed a handful of popcorn and pulled Dana into his lap, so she didn't have to look past him to see the show. Then he slid his chair back so that Thor could get a good view as well. I will tell you what is happening. When that deadbeat went missing this morning during the chaos, I went looking for him, and what did I find when the guards tracked him down? His side piece sitting in a room full of priceless gifts that belong in the city treasury. The city accountant is there now to do a full inventory of the house. But if you will excuse us, I need to borrow my husband for a moment. The dwarven woman explained between kicks to keep the mistress silent. Madam, kindly let the young woman speak. It appears that her son is quite distraught. One of the older counselors requested in a flat tone. Nobody would mistake that as a request, and the city lord's wife let go of the woman, who immediately crawled to the lord, while the boy threw himself at the city lord to hug his leg. Daddy, that evil woman is bullying us, the boy wailed. The only sound in the room was Ray and Carl munching on popcorn, and then the boy burst into tears as his father failed to respond. I believe that we should move this to a private venue, the lord insisted quietly. His wife placed her hands on her hips and gave him a challenging look. Despite the 4-rank difference in their power levels, Carl suspected that was not a fight he was going to win. The youngest of the council members, a dwarven cleric with his blonde hair in small braids tied back in a bunch, burst into laughter. Oh, I don't think that's necessary. We've all figured out what is going on. But your family drama can wait until we get past the important issues. Like how the hell we're going to keep half the city from dying when we remove the curse from the city. The others sat silently while the city lord's family stared each other down, and then the cleric cleared his throat. I suppose that we could have every cleric in town cast a mass resurrection ritual over the whole city. Most of the dead wouldn't even know that anything changed, but I'm not sure how many of them can be saved. Resurrecting the undead is tricky. The others understood what he meant without any more detail. If they'd been dead too long, or they had realized they weren't supposed to be alive anymore, using resurrection would just free them from their undead bodies. I don't suppose any of the bystanders have a suggestion? The city lord asked, trying to ignore the drama going on in front of him. Ray raised her hand. I vote that we teach Supreme Lady Matilda the randomized skill and see what happens when she uses it on the city. That was 100% a Kara suggestion. But Ray was bored now that there was no more fighting, and it sounded better than letting them argue for hours. The city lord frowned. Do not speak that name aloud. It is against city ordinance. The council cleric nodded. You never know if she'll show up to see who's talking about her. Kara perked up in her space. That was all it took? She could totally take advantage of that in the future. They could have so much fun together. Kara recalled someone saying that she could make new cities and dungeons appear, just for funsies. How much better of a friend could a badger ask for? Don't go causing troubles for an entire country just to see new things. Carl warned. Just a little bit. Don't bother the ancient dragon until we see her in person again. Kara smirked and hid her thoughts from Carl. She had definitely seen something in that mirror which told her she would get to see that dragon again. There was a lot of quiet discussion at the table before the councilman sat upright again, and the city lord motioned for them to speak. We will support having the clerics gather to cast a mass resurrection over the whole city, right before the curse is broken. It will hide most of the deaths, and the rest can all be blamed on the curse. The eldest of the counselors announced. That was a bit diabolical, but it would work well enough. The undead who weren't resurrected or destroyed would continue to be the same undead that they were right now, until they realized they were dead and freaked out. But with the curse gone, everyone would be able to see what was happening. The one that was really going to pay for this was the city lord, who would have to explain why the city wasn't actually fixed. He had been thrown under the bus, and at this point he couldn't even argue against it. Lotus wrapped her mug on the table to get everyone's attention. If it suits the city lord, we can offer you a portal out of town before the announcement is made. They will shame your entire lineage as cowards and turn your name into an epithet, but they're likely going to do that anyhow. What I mean is, if you would like to run away, the green dragon wouldn't be opposed to your survival instincts. She declared. The look on the mythic rank dwarf's face was priceless. The tiny cleric had basically just told him that his life in the city was as good as over either way, so he could either face mob justice or be decried as a coward. But after a moment, his expression steeled. I will make the public announcement in 1 hour. Have the clerics ready to cast the spells to resurrect right before the mages work together to dispel the curse after I shatter the spell's core. He decided. Then he turned to Lotus. Can you send my wife away? She doesn't deserve the fallout that will come from this. Chapter 963 Public Announcement. The group broke up, with plans to be at the stage in the town square in 1 hour. That would be enough time to warn most of the people that there was something to announce as well as prepare for the spell. With the system interface, all of the clerics already knew what they needed to do and were presumably gathering to prepare, while the other city councilors were making preparations for the fallout from the day's events. Carl and the team found themselves a nice spot where they could see the stage, but wouldn't be in the press of the crowd. That was their waiting spot for the show to start. True to his word, 45 minutes after they split, the city lord was on the stage, followed by the majority of the council members. Notably absent was the cleric, but the rest were there. People of Banar, I have tragic news for you all. We have been cheated and tricked by one that we should have been able to trust. The renovation of the city was never done. It is nothing more than an illusion placed over the city. An illusion that hides a most terrible curse. You might have noticed that your food lasts longer than you are used to, that your aging loved ones have pulled through longer than anyone could have expected. But the sad truth is that neither is true. The curse forces everything in the city to take on a pristine condition. The buildings, the trade goods, even the people. Many of those standing among us today are long dead and maintained by this necromantic curse. If they were to leave the city, the magic would fade, and it is believed that they would either collapse or continue their existence as a form of undead. The Lord took a deep breath. I was the one who hired the contractor. There was no bid for the job. I accepted his proposal and paid for his services personally. This curse is upon the city of Banar due to my choices. As of today, I will be stepping down as city lord, and the king will be sending a replacement guardian for the people. But first, the forge priests will cleanse the hidden decay of the city, and then I will break the curse placed upon it, allowing everyone a fresh start. There was panic in the streets as everyone tried to understand what exactly that meant. But the Lord didn't intend to give them time to worry, and the first half of the effort, the combined spell cast by the clerics, swept over the city. Carl watched as the spell washed over the undead in the city, and most of them started to heal, becoming whole again. However, contrary to his expectations, none of them collapsed, even the ones who were clearly not healing. Maybe this wasn't going to end as badly as... Nope, there it was. As soon as the resurrection spell ended, hundreds of city residents collapsed, and the city lord gritted his teeth, then shattered a statue in his hands. The illusion faded from the city as residents who had lost loved ones wailed in despair, and then the mage from the city council opened a portal for the city lord to step through and moved to address the crowd. As the temporary head of the city council, you have my condolences on your losses. We will be starting an effort to actually reconstruct the city over the next few weeks, and city funding will be available for funerals. Rest assured, the cost of burying the fallen with dignity will not fall entirely on the people. The shock was beginning to wear off as the people realized that their loved ones had been dead for quite some time. Once the resurrection had failed, most of the bodies had shriveled to emaciated corpses, as you would expect of a body left in the desert's dry heat for months or years. Looking at them that way, many realized that they had gotten far longer than expected with their loved one. But what they hadn't realized yet was that many of the illnesses they had seen lately were a result of bad food. The clerics kept most of those from being fatal, but there would surely be a few. The outrage was beginning to creep into the crowd as well. Where did that no-good lord get to? He needs to face judgment for his crimes. An old dwarven woman shouted. The mage held up his hand to silence the crowd. And he will. We sent him to the palace, where he will be held pending trial for incompetence. Incompetence? He got our people killed. You might not have been on the council then, but I haven't forgotten the lies that he told us about the renovation before he cursed us. The woman shouted. The mage bowed his head to the elder and raised his voice with magical augmentation. It will be 1 month before the trial. Until then, the former city lord will be in custody. His wife has been exiled from the city, returned to live with her family. If you want to attend the trial, you have 1 month to get to the capital. He declared. That was acceptable to most. There was a portal platform, and more than enough earth mages in the city that they would surely be able to find someone to open a portal for whole groups of them. The capital was going to have a monumental crowd for the trial, but for now, there was more interest in what they were going to do about the situation in the city. Not only with the dead, but also the rotted products and the dilapidated buildings. It all needed to be handled before any of the buildings collapsed, and suddenly every dwarven earth mage in town was incredibly popular. One of the other counselors stepped forward to the enchanted microphone. If emergency repairs need to be made, please inform the city guard, and the captain will approve payment to a local earth mage out of the city budget. We are willing to clear the city coffers to make things right if that is what we need. A few lean years for city programs are inevitable, but we have a plan to keep the city guard fully funded. Chapter 964, no longer pristine. The speeches were interrupted by the sound of alarm bells being sounded all over the city. At first, Carl thought that it might be about the people who had dropped dead due to the resurrection spell, But the alarms were continuing, and a secondary tone was introduced after the first few seconds, as if the situation had been upgraded. The counselor raised his voice. Everyone, remain calm and prepare to defend yourself. The city is currently under attack, both internally and externally. That did nothing at all to help calm down the crowds. There were elderly and children gathered in the square, both for their daily activities and for the announcement that had just been made, so the stay calm recommendation was generally ignored. Instead, everyone was trying to get the vulnerable ones, the children and the lower ranked, to safe spots while arranging for defense of those spots, but nobody in the area knew what the threat was yet. Then a trio of ogre lords simply appeared in the middle of the market and began roaring and attacking. Fuck, Tessa breathed as she realized what was happening. Monsters spawn inside the city. Ophelia agreed. Carl and Dana were already in motion, intending to intercept the attacks of the ogres towards a group of dwarven children who were huddled together in panic. Dana called her golems to block one ogre, while it was faster for Carl to move himself than to activate a skill. The sound of shattering stone told Carl that something was very wrong. A single strike from the ogre had shattered both of Dana's stone golems, just before Carl slammed into the second ogre with a shoulder tackle, taking it to the ground, but not causing any visible damage. The haint claw equipped itself on both of his hands as Carl began to tear at the shoulder muscles of the downed ogre, but even his claws were only making shallow cuts with each strike. The breaking of the curse had triggered a totem-rank ogre spawn. How long had the curse of pristine appearance been holding off spawns in the area that this much magic had built up to be unleashed the moment that the curse was no longer in effect? Carl called for the bodyguards to protect the group from the third ogre, which was currently engaged by a humanoid Thor. Ray's golems had taken over from Dana's, which were now trying to attack the ogre from the back. The dwarves weren't cowards, and a dozen overlord-ranked warriors had charged the ogres, screaming battle cries at the sight of their ancient enemies. The council had scattered, each taking a district of the city, but they had forgotten one important factor. The central district near the city lord's manor was supposed to be covered by the city lord. He was gone, so there was currently no totem rank or higher defender for this district, where there would normally be the strongest fighter in the city. Carl caught the ogre's arms as it reached up to choke him, and the two became locked in a stalemate, while the dwarven warriors began to hack the oversized monster apart. 90% damage reduction was a lot, but not enough when you were faced with dozens of dwarves wielding axes, plus a Carl who was constantly bombarding the ogre's face with void blasts. The ogre to Carl's left, the one that was facing off against Ray's golems, shrieked in pain, and Carl heard the spider laugh, a raspy whistle, as her natural form had no vocal cords. Oh, that's a good idea, Kara realized, and another mournful howl filled the air, while the dwarves cheered. Carl looked up and found that Kara was attached to an ogre's back by her claws, right in the middle of his back where he couldn't reach her. That would explain the frustration, and it was a pleasant change from all the things that Carl suspected that the Void Badger might have done to him. The dwarves had encircled the ogres, and they were cutting them down with brutal efficiency, despite the ogre's thick hide and vitality. Carl could see soft matter through the bone of the ogre's skull, and one final void blast ended its struggle, as well as eliminating most of its head. Then the body vanished from underneath him, and Ray transformed to help Carl to his feet. Good work. That one is almost intact. She congratulated him, then transformed back to finish off the one she was working on. It wasn't giving up, and the golems were being replaced every 10 seconds or so, but nobody except Carl and Kara had an appropriate attack skill for dealing with a threat of this level. Kara got busy making ogre insides into ogre outsides after she got through its hide, and Carl switched to his bow to effectively cripple the remaining ogre, without getting in the way of the golems. The air cracked as Carl let loose the first supersonic arrow, punching deep into the ogre's chest. The dwarves turned to stare at him in shock, stunned at the pure physical strength needed to draw a bow that would fire that hard. Carl frowned and deactivated haste. The bow was not intended to be supersonic, but the spell effect increased his attack speed, which apparently included arrows. Carl continued to fire arrows, now at slightly less than the speed of sound, while the ogre struggled to swat away all the annoying summons that were continually harassing it. They were never ending. The moment that he killed one, two more appeared. The ogre glared at Carl with unfettered hatred in its eyes. This was all the fault of that damnable cat demon. A mighty ogre should be able to squish all this dwarven filth. But that demon and his odd allies were here to torture it. An arrow took the ogre in the throat, and it collapsed, gurgling with rage and unfulfilled murderous intent. Hawk, what group is closest? Carl asked, knowing that the bird was around somewhere. What? Oh yeah, just stay there. A pair are coming from the south toward you. Now. Hawk was clearly distracted, but not by the ogres. Where are you now? Sand mice. Carl shook his head and turned to the south, where a running battle between a totem-ranked dwarf and a heavily armored ogre lord was going on. The dwarf was doing his best, But the ogre was more interested in keeping him at bay while hunting civilians. Carl's first arrow pinged off its helmet, and the ogre lord turned to see who had the audacity to fire arrows at it. Carl waved a greeting, and the dwarf hacked a deep wound in the monster's already damaged right knee. It was standard dwarven tactics against ogres: hack them down to size, then fight them when they were easier to reach. Now that the majority of the public space had been cleared of non-combatants, Thor transformed into his natural state and Tessa vaulted onto his back, prepared for the charge. That got the ogre's full attention. The behemoth was the first thing in the city that was larger than a totem-ranked ogre lord, as Ophelia was fighting as a werebear and not in dire bear form, which would have risked stepping on someone when the area was still packed with bystanders. From the east, an ogre roared in victory, and Lotus whistled, indicating that Carl should follow her. Good luck, buddy. Ask Sister Kara to buff your horns if you need to stab him harder. Carl instructed Thor as he turned to face the new threat. We've got this. Chapter 965 Rescue the Dwarves. Carl leapt over a ruined building and found two ogres standing over a dead dwarven earth mage. That should be one of the council members, and apparently no match for whatever groups of ogres he had found. But he was also fighting mostly alone, and not with a large group as Carl had been. Ray, Shadow stepped to the corpse, and hurled it at Lotus, then went incorporeal as a massive fist descended towards her. The activation of Leviathan made Carl nearly 6 meters tall when fully buffed, and he smiled as he slung his sword over his shoulder, while making a rude gesture with the haint claw on his other hand. What do you say, gentlemen? Think you can take me 2-on-1? The ogres charged and Carl sidestepped as fast as he could, blurring in the monster's vision as his blade cut deep into the side of the closest ogre before he stabbed the clawed fingers of his free hand into the wound. Soul Steel began to drain the monster's vitality as the ogres swung backhanded attacks at Carl, who was still moving. He charged between them, focusing his attacks on the same ogre over and over as his blade shrieked through the air. To the watching dwarves, it looked like a streak of blue fire in the air as the blade spun, parried and attacked, all too fast for most to accurately track. Remy came over to watch the battle and contribute a steady stream of chain lightning attacks to the effort. She needed a skill at totem rank, but she just couldn't seem to grasp the difference, even though she was looking right at it as Carl used Void Blast on every strike. Watch, sister. This is how you do it, Ray announced, then appeared behind one of the ogres and began systematically dismantling its back muscles. The ogre was rapidly being flayed alive, and her bladed legs no longer seemed to have any issues cutting through the thick hide. Skill Master 5 activation. Offensive adaptation has evolved. Totem rank epic grade skill. Predation gained. Predation passive skill. The user has become a natural-born predator of everything they see. Increases damage significantly with every strike against a known target type. Bypasses a portion of the target's damage reduction. Ooh, the stabby sister learned a new trick. That's pretty impressive. Remy agreed. Unfortunately, it either didn't spread to her or it only worked on melee attacks and not skills. There was a good way to test it. Remy sent her Naga bodyguards to engage the ogres, and they landed a few strikes which were doing increasing amounts of damage. But not nearly enough to think that they were ignoring the totem rank damage reduction. Ray laughed at the effort. Predation was only a melee attack skill when used by her. It was part of her body, so if she attacked with her limbs it was a totem-ranked attack. But it didn't apply to blades or skills the same way. So, for others it was nothing more than a damage buff. Even her golems didn't get the full benefit. They weren't spider enough, she assumed. Carl landed 3 more quick strikes on the ogre, and the last one carved a deep furrow across its belly, and massive bleeding. The ogre retreated, and Carl turned his attention to the other, which was currently trying to catch Ray using some sort of flaming club attack. Carl swung at its knee, and the ogre turned to defend itself. But at the last instant, Carl changed his footing and launched at the wounded ogre, who was caught off guard. The blade sunk deep through its chest, and surged with power as the ogre died. Now it was 2-on-1 in the opposite direction, with Carl and Ray teaming up on the survivor. Carl heard Thor laughing in his mind, but ignored it for the moment as he sent a flurry of attacks at the ogre. It was left with an impossible choice. Carl's blade to its vitals, or Ray's claws through its back. It tried to spin with its club, but Ray used Night Haunter to simply step back through the wall of the building behind her, leaving the ogre baffled as to where she went, while Carl was presented with the ogre's shredded back. A second precise strike with Void Blast punched deep into the beast's heart, and the second ogre fell. Lotus, how is your patient doing? He called to the large tree. Lotus shook her branches happily, sprinkling golden dust all over the ground. The dwarf was alive again, and recovering, but still in rough condition. Lotus was letting her long-duration healing spells take care of his remaining wounds, but he was also out of stamina and mana. He had fallen when the repeated attacks had burned through his mana pool, and his earth shield had failed him. Carl patted the dwarf on the shoulder as he passed by, and Remy grabbed the mage by the chin to dump a questionable-looking potion down his throat. New recipe for combined mana and stamina potion, she explained. The totem-ranked mage instantly looked better, and while it was clear that he wasn't at 100%, he did manage to get to his feet and stretch some of the phantom pains out of his muscles. I will come check on you in a second. The others need a hand with their ogre, Carl explained. The dwarf grabbed his pant leg. Go east. There is a whole other group over there, and the citizens are on the run. Carl nodded, and motioned for Remy to follow him. Ray, help them out. They won't need it for long. Kara learned a new trick. Carl turned to see what she meant, and realized the badger had a thin rope, made of spider silk wrapped around the ogre's neck, coated in void blast, that was pulsing like a buzz saw, or the world's most insane garrote wire. That was certainly one way to kill an ogre. Chapter 966 Move the Wounded. Carl ran off to the east, slowing his pace so Remy could keep up. It wouldn't take much to find the ogres, he assumed. There was enough screaming to lead him in the right direction, even with the other sounds of battle. But there wasn't one other group here, there were three, and another dead dwarven totem. Ray, you're up. Bring him to Lotus and then hunt for more defeated totems. All the local clerics will be in one spot for the casting they just finished. Carl instructed. Ray darted off to claim the body, which she brought to Lotus, while Carl took a moment to decide how exactly he was going to make this work. 9 really was a lot of ogres when you looked at them all together, and they were all totems. That old dragon wasn't joking. This place wasn't a safe one to be casually traveling around. As one, the ogres sensed his power level and turned to face Carl. Carl focused on activating demonic oppression, Ray's bloodline suppression ability, and the ogres growled at him, but didn't make any attempt to attack. Oh, it's ugly out here. There are at least 6 ogres left for every totem, Ray noted as she searched the city. Once you find the dead ones, go back and help the ones in the most trouble. I don't think they'll mind if you keep the bodies. That made for a happy Ray, and she was claiming every ogre body that she passed. They weren't edible to dwarves or beastkin, and the trolls were mostly vegetarian, so nobody should really miss them. Remy, you hide for a moment, and then summon the bodyguards at random spots to confuse and distract the ogres. I am going to try to make them chase me around this open area with the destroyed buildings, Carl instructed, and Remy quickly reached upward to pull herself onto the roof of a crumbling stone house. The butterfly made her invisible, and Remy gave Carl 4 thumbs up to indicate she was in position. Carl switched to his bow and took a deep breath, hoping that his idiotic idea actually worked. Fully buffed, he unleashed arrows into the 9 ogres as fast as he could, while the monsters charged in his direction. Just as they were about to make their first attack, Carl activated teleport to the spot where they had started, and continued to fire. Ogres were dumb to start with, and being from a monster spawn, they were also enraged with bloodlust. It had worked once, and hopefully would a few more times, as the arrows were doing an impressive amount of damage. We got the ogre down. The area is clear, Thor informed Carl just as he teleported again, this time to the top of a building at the end of the block, so he could see and hit more of the ogres in the middle of the group. Good work. Keep the area safe, there are countless people hiding in the buildings there. I will catch up with you once we're done here. The ogres were dumb, but they did understand some things, like not giving the prey a place to run away to. So, when Carl began firing from the building, only half charged for him, and the other half spread out to cover the open areas, starting with the ones where he had already been. That was when Remy summoned the bodyguards into battle. They distracted an ogre at the edge of the battle and caused a few ogres to think there were reinforcements. Carl took advantage to move to another building and fire arrows into the one fighting the Naga pair, then 2 more close to them. 3 ogres fell, and Carl had a moment of appreciation for the predation skill. He hadn't put more than 6 or 8 void blast arrows into any of them, but it was enough to take them out. That had also made an empty spot in the ogre's deployment, and there was only one other near where Carl was standing. The brute charged, attempting to swat away the arrows with its club, and Carl held out to the last second, then switched to his sword and charged to run the ogre through before teleporting again and returning to his bow. He found himself on a rooftop only 1 over from Remy, who called a hellstorm vortex into the ogres, which caused chaos as the vortex multiplied faster than they could swat at it. They didn't seem to know where she was casting from, so Remy continued her assault, and Carl dropped another ogre with his arrows. She couldn't use chain lightning as the spell originated at her, and would defeat the purpose of being invisible. But the vortexes were quick to cast, and weren't giving away her position just yet. Remy laughed as a group of 5 overlord-ranked dwarven warriors ran to the edge of the battle, then promptly turned around and ran in another direction. 5 overlords versus 1 totem-ranked ogre was workable. 5 on 5? That was suicide for them. Carl moved again, and put up a blockade wall of ice to slow the ogres as he continued to fire. It didn't slow them for long, but it was long enough for Carl to take out 2 more of the ogres, leaving only 3 all wounded. That was close enough to defeat it for Carl, so he summoned his Lamia bodyguards, as well as 2 dire bear golems, and erected another blockade in front of himself. The summoned beasts only needed to hold the ogres for a few minutes. That was all it would take to get enough arrows in them to finish them off. Stone spikes erupted from the ground, and Carl saw a battered-looking totem rank earth mage join the battle from the street closest to Lotus. That should be the one that they resurrected, even though it was a bit early for him to be fighting again. But the intervention was perfectly timed. His stone barriers didn't just wound the ogres, they slowed them down while Carl fired, and within 10 seconds it was all over but the cleanup. Chapter 967. Sorting. Carl teleported to the mage and nodded politely. Thanks for the help. I was getting tired of running around trying not to get smashed. The dwarf laughed. Smashed by an ogre club is what happened to him the first time he engaged the enemy. How many of them did you get so far? Have you been luring them to this spot? He asked professionally. Carl shook his head. I was with the group for the first few in the middle of the city, by the healing tree. Then the 2 who were at your body. Then the 9 here. I'm gonna have to move again, I can hear more ogres nearby, but if you wish to lead the civilians here to safety in the middle of the city, you can. I have assistance, as you can see. The mage shook his head. Let them hide where they are comfortable. There are plenty of underground tunnels and bolt holes in the city for them to escape through. It's better to let them stay in an area they're familiar with. It will increase their chances of survival if they're attacked. The reports from the others say that the total number of ogres isn't high. The city guard has had some luck dealing with them, and most appeared alone. I have no idea how I managed to get 9 and then 4 together in my zone. He must have killed the other 2 because Carl hadn't found them. Hawk. Are there ogres outside the city? Carl asked. Nope, only inside the city. And most of them are gone. But I think that I found the portal. You know, the center of the monster spawn. Hawk replied. Where is it? On the roof of the temple. That could make things interesting. If the center of the spawn was over the temple, then they were going to have to check it to see what sort of dungeon it was. But with all totem-ranked ogre spawns, there was a chance that it would have mythic-ranked bosses. It seemed unlikely, as mythic would get the same sort of damage reduction against totems that totems did against overlord and lower. But it was possible, and Carl didn't know anything at all about this sort of powerful spawn. We could send someone in, one of the summoned creatures, and ask them what it is. There is a chance that it's not a dungeon but a trial instance spawn. If that is what it is, it might be a huge opportunity for us all. Dana suggested. That was a good point. If it wasn't something they could handle, they could inform the city council. Assuming they weren't there already. Most of the ogres had been defeated by the city's residents already, and Ray was feeling quite smug about her collection of totem-ranked ogres. Her next advancement bath would need a totem-ranked base to go with the mythic blood that she had gotten from the dwarves. And now she had plenty, even if she didn't ask Carl to shrink her for the event. Oh, that was a good idea. The bath could feel like an enormous swimming pool. Someone get Lotus and those under her care. Let's go to the temple. Just have the wounded carry her healing totems so they can move without losing the effect. Carl decided. There were 2 totem-ranked mages, plus the earth mage, a ranger and a bard among the rescued totems. Carl did a double take at that. Does a bard even have combat skills from their class? Or do you have to just hope for the best? Carl asked as the middle-aged dwarven woman got to her feet. The bard smiled at him and hummed a tune that made Carl's body surge with energy. We're not solo fighters. But a totem-ranked bard is one of the most powerful group combat classes. I know that your team has numerous group buffs, but so do I, she explained. The motley group made their way through the streets, headed for the temple. The city was getting quieter as they walked, the zone already cleared by the clerics and their paladins, whose barracks were right next to the temple. So, Carl didn't have high hopes for the situation until he saw where the actual portal was. There was a statue of a dwarf holding a scepter placed on top of the dome of the temple, and the portal was above that. Unless you were a totem or your species could fly, there was little chance anyone had entered yet. Carl motioned to the Lamia on his right. Excuse the manhandling. Carl joked as he used unobtrusive behemoth to shrink the Lamia to the size of a python, then curled her in his hand. An overhead toss sent the Lamia flying through the portal, and Kara's eyes went wide with realization. Sure, she could fly, but she could also fly. Carl could hurl her much faster than her wings would take her. The Lamia vanished into the portal, and then came flying back out. Summoned assistants may not participate, Carl smiled. Ladies and gentlemen, we have ourselves a trial instance. The system just informed me that summoned assistants may not participate. So we will have to see what it is for ourselves. Dana gritted her teeth and ran up to the portal. If there were limitations on this trial, she was not going to hesitate and miss her spot in the quota. She vanished inside, and Carl tried to send her a message. What do you see inside? User unavailable. Communications are instance locked. We can't contact anyone inside, but I'm going. I will see you all on the other side. Tessa cleared her throat. Oh yeah, not everyone can fly. The dwarves laughed, and the bard took both Tessa and Lotus by the hand. I will bring the ladies up. Your lot can bring the green-haired behemoth and the spider lady. She insisted. Ray laughed and simply leapt to the portal, then bounced off it. What do you mean ineligible? She complained, then jumped at it again. Again she failed to enter. Remy transformed into a spirit snake, and waited as the bard entered with Tessa and Lotus. They entered just fine, so Remy went to follow, only to run nose first into the portal. Oh, this is some bullshit. Just return to your space, and I will bring you in that way. Carl instructed the beasts. Most of them did, though Hawk took a few seconds to finish bombarding one of the remaining ogres first. But Kara decided to try anyhow. She was all set up, ready to grab onto the portal with her claws, but it let her pass through. Well, that's our signal. See you when you finish. The dwarf beside Carl announced. Then they were all headed for the portal. Chapter 968, Sholaha Trial. Carl stepped through the portal, and found Kara waiting for him on the other side. An open field of stone, looking like the aftermath of a rock slide, greeted them. A massive golden temple stood in the distance, with two crystalline golems standing near the base. Carl walked to the statues, not quite jogging but not wasting any time, in case the instance was limited in duration. Greetings, adherent of the old gods. Welcome to the Sholaha Desert Trial instance. You have been introduced to the Overlord-ranked trial grounds. Please choose your challenge. The golem declared. Words appeared in the air between Carl and the golems, made of small stones from the ground. Option 1, Attempt Advancement, difficulty 10. Option 2, Attempt Class Change, difficulty 5. Option 3, Attempt Status Optimization, difficulty 7. Option 4, Random Bonus? Carl grabbed Kara before she could immediately go for the random option. At least take 3 seconds to think about it. He reminded her. Thought about it, still want to know what they are hiding. Though, a class change. Would that give me one as I don't have one? That could be fun too. No, I know what will happen if I do that. Randomness is best. Once she finished speaking, Kara vanished, and Remy began complaining in Carl's mind. This is discrimination. Just because I follow a shaman god, I don't get to play? Even brothers Thor and Hawk can't come out. Carl shrugged. I guess it's an exclusive thing. They did put it right above a temple. Ray considered the answer. It said no to me, but the spider goddess is ancient. Does that mean that old gods actually refers to a specific group? The golem made a noise like grinding stone. That is correct, daughter of the spiders. The old gods are not the beast gods, not the elemental deities, not the renegade gods, not the titan gods, and not the council of divinity. That at least answered her first question. But why does Kara get to play? The god of chaos is one of the old gods. His favor grants her entrance, as the world dragon's favor grants the Carl's entrance. Haha, they call you the Carl too. Carl rolled his eyes at her mockery, and focused on the options. Totem rank advancement did sound like an incredible option, even if the difficulty was high. But he was more intrigued by what a status optimization was. Could that take him to the theoretical limits of his power? That would be flat out broken, assuming it was as good as predation at increasing his damage. He would make it to totem rank soon enough, that much was essentially inevitable. Changing his class might be harder, but he had already seen the requirements to move to the next class in his current progression, and he didn't meet them yet. Requirements for next class advancement: reach totem rank. Fill all beast slots or combine spaces to remove redundant areas. Visit any dungeon, instance, or relic with system integration. Not only was he not yet a totem, he still had one empty beast space formed. So the class change would have to be something other than the natural progression, unless it closed his remaining beast space and bypassed the rank restriction. Carl pulled a bit of power from the Haint Claw and the Sword of Champions, and felt the state of his body. He was physically very close to totem rank. A bit more optimization from the weapons after this battle, and he should be able to push through no matter what. A month at the most and he would be a totem. 2 if they were slacking. Carl made his decision. I will take the status optimization. The golem nodded, and gestured toward the temple. I believe that you know the basics, but this trial is integrated. Simply walk to the top within the next 48 hours to achieve perfect optimization. You may take any path, they are all equal. Carl stepped to the temple, then walked around to his right so that the sun was at his back and not in his eyes. Sometimes the little things made the biggest difference. Carl stepped on the first step and felt all the spells on his body, other than the beast form spell, shatter. So, he had to do this under only his physical abilities. With the Chaos Beast constitution, It shouldn't be too difficult to walk up the first few steps. According to the description, it removed physical limits on development. That wasn't necessarily the same as removing limits on physical development, but Carl had high hopes for his gains this time. The second step sent power surging through Carl's body, and in their mental storage his weapons buzzed with resonance. Alright, he knew what to expect now. He had gone through it before, when his body was overloaded after the battle with the undead. But the third step made his body burn like fire before leaving him slightly stronger than before. The fourth step bombarded him with elemental energies, as if he were under attack by 50 mages at the same time. If he had thought that the fourth step was bad, it had nothing on this one. The sixth step was all of the above, plus an oppressive force, similar to how the physical restriction of the first trial he had ever entered had tried to crush him. The seventh step, everything increased. Then again on the eighth. Ooh, your fur is smoking. Nope, freezing. Freezing and smoking and glowing. Now I'm kind of glad I'm not out there. Remy narrated. Thanks for the words of support. Carl joked as he stepped up onto the 10th platform, and all of the effects all doubled. It nearly drove him to his knees, but after a moment, his body seemed to adjust and Carl stepped forward again. Only to find that the rate of increase had also doubled. 11 steps down, 989 to go. Chapter 969. Optimal Options. In the Monarch-ranked portion of the trial, Tessa, Lotus, Ophelia and Dana all stood in front of the statues, facing the same 4 choices that Carl and Kara had. Option 1, Attempt Advancement, difficulty 7. Option 2, Attempt Class Change, difficulty 1. Option 3, Attempt Status Optimization, difficulty 11. Option 4, Random Bonus? Status Optimization is difficulty 11? Dana muttered as she read the options. And why is Class Change so easy? Tessa agreed. The golem made a grinding noise as it prepared to speak. Difficulty changes with rank and ability. Common and uncommon classes have little trouble advancing to a rare class. In contrast, reaching the peak of physical and metaphysical optimization is generally considered to be impossible for humans and dragonkin. The golem insisted. So it's 11 out of 10? Alright. Ophelia grumbled. What would it take to go from Overlord to Totem? Is that harder? Lotus asked, now curious how the ranking worked. Overlord to Totem rank advancements require a perfect completion. Difficulty, 10 out of 10. Lotus smirked. That meant Carl would likely choose one of the other options. Did that mean that if she was confident she could catch up to him? That would be hilarious. But her dragon guide, the juvenile green dragon who constantly watched the world through her eyes, wanted to know about class changes. It was a difficulty of 1. But wouldn't that be even better? Carl was broken because he had the good class. What if she could have the good class too? She could just have a whole set of beast spaces full of fluffy things and dragons. Could clerics qualify for that? It had to be an option for the green dragon clerics at the very least. The goddess wasn't so cruel as to keep them away from the fluffy things just because they were faithful. Tessa and Ophelia were both thinking similar things. The advanced classes were too powerful. If they were actually easy to get, but just didn't spawn for newbies, weren't they missing out on too much? Dana was torn between the 2 obvious options. She could catch up to Carl and become an overlord, but that wouldn't really be catching up, would it? He was far too powerful for an average overlord. So, she could take a chance on a better class and leverage it for faster growth. There was also a time limit on the trial, 48 hours. Presumably, it took most of that to get a perfect clearance, so she didn't have long to wait here and decide. Murim Battlemage was already a good class, but it wouldn't hurt to ask the golem about her chances. What are the odds that I get a better class than what I have if I choose class change? She asked. The golem paused for a moment as it turned its head towards her. All class options will be an advancement from the trial taker's current class, assuming that they pass the trial to a sufficient standard for the desired class. A difficulty 1 standard, yes. But from the sound of it, the better you did, the better the options. Perhaps she could get something like Beast Master, but for mages? What is the difficulty for the Beast Master class? She asked. The Beast Master is a rare class. Difficulty 3 or higher for a success. What Dana had forgotten was that Carl had advanced to Beast Master Packmaster. So his standard was actually higher to get any sort of success. Lotus got excited about the lore drop. What is the hardest class to get? The golem seemed to smile at her as it answered. The most difficult to obtain class among the options in this trial is Ancient World Crafter. However, none of the applicants present have the prerequisites to obtain it, even with a perfect completion. What are the requirements? Lotus tried. Demigod level power, a divine bloodline, and an existing class in the ancient series of classes. The golem explained. Lotus frowned. So, not me. Not you. I will take the class option, please. Lotus decided. So polite. Choose your path up the temple. They are all equal. So the route you choose will not affect the outcome. Tessa and Ophelia nodded at each other. I will take the class change option as well. They declared in unison, then began walking toward the temple. If I attempt to optimize my status, will I get any gains, even though it is not possible to fully complete the challenge? Dana asked the golem once the others had gone. I do not have the answer to that question. The outcome of a failed challenge is up to the gods. Dana nodded. Carl was the one with all the divine luck. It was better to stay in her lane and do what she knew that she could do. I will also take the class advancement option, she decided. All she had to do was reach the top of the temple, and she should be able to get a class superior to Carl's. Something good enough to put her on the path to surpassing him. Dana would not allow herself to be left behind as the damsel in distress childhood crush. The pain of the challenges seared through her body, but Dana kept her eyes locked on the top of the temple. Eyes on the goal. Eyes on the goal. She muttered to herself, step after step on her way up the side of the temple. Each of them had taken a different side of the temple, so they could not see each other. But each side was equally grim. As the golem had promised, the trials were equal, and when they moved from the 10th to the 11th step, it was nearly enough to make all 4 of them reconsider this trial. But the simple math was enough to keep them going. 1,000 steps. 10 levels of difficulty. If they couldn't make it past the 100th step, they were likely to fail to gain a class advancement. Hello everyone, this is Shadow. Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I can't publish many of the audiobooks you love. That's why I've created a special paid service where you can enjoy over 300 high-quality audiobooks from platforms like Webnovel, Pocket FM, Audible, Wuxia, and more. Each novel comes as a one-time purchase, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. After payment, you'll receive full access via Telegram, along with all future updates for that novel. You'll find a wide selection of your favorite genres and titles, always in premium audio quality. Check the full list of available novels in the description. DM me now to get your favorite stories in audiobook form and start listening today.